Hello and welcome to the Trading Mindset Podcast. My name's Nic Penrake, and on our podcast we look to talk to traders that have educated themselves to successfully trade the markets today. As you know, this can be a tough gig for anyone starting out, but we look to get inside the minds of these successful traders and understand the strategies that they use, the morning rituals or morning routines that they follow, and how they trade upon the economic news. We also have much more.
Hello, and my name is Louise Nonwheeler. I am the co-host of the Trading Mindset Podcast. I am a multi-award-winning clinical hypnotherapist and life coach, and I specialize in working with financial traders on their psychology of trading. In this podcast, we talk to traders about their emotions that they experience, the challenges that they face on a daily basis, and the techniques that they have used that have really helped them to get from where they are to becoming profitable traders.
Hello and welcome to the Trading Mindset Podcast. My name's Nic Penrake and I'm joined by my lovely co-host Louise Nonwheeler. Louise, how you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Nilton. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Did you have a good New Year?
I had a really good New Year's, thanks. Looking forward to the year ahead. Got a few plans, good goals, and yeah. And what about yourself?
Yeah, same really. Looking to trade as much as possible and make as much money as possible. So that's the goal for me.
All sounds good. So this evening we have a very special guest on the show. His name is Nic Penrake. Nic is the founder of A Trader's Life, which is a fantastic podcast where he speaks to traders from all around the world. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on his show back in 2020. Nic is also a trader, a writer and director, and an author. So without further ado, welcome on the show, Nic.
Hey, Louise. Hey, Nilton. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. How are you, Nic?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, still alive.
Good. Did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah, it was very good. Yeah, meeting up with family, as most people do that. It's all good. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. So, Nic, I spoke to you last when you had me on your podcast.
Yeah.
How's that going for you at the moment? And how's your trading going, first and foremost?
Well, let me just start with the podcast. I mean, I started the podcast back in 2020 when I just started trading, really, and didn't know all that much about trading. But it was a good way of learning about trading, talking to people who obviously had been doing it a lot longer than I had. And it was very interesting talking to people, getting their stories, hence the title, A Trader's Life, rather than just, what's going on in the markets this week. So, yeah, how long have I been doing it now? That's about a year and a bit. And being a podcast about money, making money, I guess that grew quicker than my other podcast, which is about filmmaking. That's called One Good Take. It's interesting, isn't it? You'd think film might even be quicker, but no, the Trader's Life podcast grew quicker, a lot quicker.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, it's been going well. It's been interesting. Bit of a lull during December. That's normal. Most people are doing other things, but looking to book new people through January. Yeah. So that's an answer to your question about podcasting. But trading, very up and down. I mean, I've had good runs and bad runs, and I think it's fairly normal for most people teaching themselves more or less in their first year or two,
What seems to be the problem, Nic?
Yeah, for me, well, I think the markets have been quite difficult. Even top traders have found this volatility that we're going through, well, since autumn, really.
Yes.
And it's carrying on. I've found it difficult. And I think if you're a trader, perhaps I've been trading 18 months, so not even 2 years yet, then I think that's quite a tough task to get right enough so that you're making consistent profit. My other main problems were probably what most traders experience, which is, risk management is a weak area. So you only have to have one or two trades that go wrong, and that can be, the equivalent of 10 going right. So
yeah,
that's something I'm working on. I'm improving. I'm reading charts much better. I'm identifying patterns much better. I'm recognizing patterns so that I abstain from a trade. My discipline is better. One of the big problems, as we all know, with trading is the emotions come in, and so you have one good trade and you think, hey, right, and you jump back in with the same kind of, well, it's not just confidence, it's almost exuberance, and you think the next one's going to be the same. You get sloppy, And before you know it, you're down. So maintaining that discipline, maintaining that coolness, and not jumping on the next thing that is moving and that seems like an easy trade is so important. It's probably more important than actually finding a good trade. It's that ability to hold back and just control yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's been there, Nick, me especially. It's once you get that bug, you think, wow, I know what I'm doing, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Let me, I've made that X amount of money. Let me jump back in again and double that.
Yeah.
But then before you know it, you've lost that and you're now negative.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
It's a vicious cycle. But once you can master that and risk management, which is the number one thing that everyone should really learn when trading, is risk management. Once you can master that and really, switch off once you've made your money and then walk away, then, it's a good day.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, today was a good day, so
Good.
won't argue with that. I did decent. It was like 350 quid.
Perfect.
Well, that's a good day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, not trading big mounts,
But there's so many different aspects, isn't there, Nick? We sort of go into trading and we think, right, okay, we just need a good strategy, risk management. But there's so much more to it than that, because it's the emotional side, which can, that it's a roller coaster until a person really masters or manages their emotions. Of course, it's experience and knowledge as well, but it's really working on the psychology of trading as well, as which is really important. So
yeah, and of course identifying patterns, and I think you can only achieve that by putting the hours in. What do they say, 10,000 hours, and maybe you can be an expert at what you're doing. And I think that's true, really. You look at charts and as a beginning you think, well, that's fairly straightforward, and a few months down the line you realize actually it really isn't, and there are all sorts of quirks and idiosyncrasies and so on. And reading them is a lot harder than you first imagine them to be.
Of course, yeah.
Getting those patterns right and understanding how they work is also crucial, not just the emotions. And they kind of work in tandem, because if you're not reading the patterns correctly, then you get emotional, and your emotional state makes you create a mess, so they work together, don't they, in that sense?
Hand in hand.
Would you say you're a pattern trader, Nick, or do you look for like support and resistance or supply and demand? What's your trading style?
Yeah, support and resistance with patterns, both. Yeah, and I use the moving averages, but they are just extra elements in looking for confluence when I take a trade. So I wouldn't rely on just that. I would be looking at, the support and resistance, as you said, moving averages. I quite often make some use of the MACD, but I change the settings to my own settings. I don't think the regular settings, the default settings, are any good.
Mm-hmm.
They're not responsive enough. So I change my settings on that, and it's much better. And just occasionally the news, but I'm much more of a technical trader than relying on fundamentals. Fundamentals are very unreliable.
Do you trade the news then, Nick?
Mostly not, no. I mean, you get certain news items. Oh, it used to be Trump all the time, didn't it, with his stupid tweets? But
that's right.
You'll hear of a shortage of a certain commodity, for example. Like coffee. There was bad weather. There was the supply issue because of COVID and so on. So if you look at coffee, it's gone to the moon, really. And when we're in the shops, we're looking at coffee, and it's £2.75 a year ago for just a regular packet of coffee. It's now like £4.40 or something like that. And if you look at the chart, you can see why, because it's gone, as I said, sky high. So things like that, that's a bit of, I suppose that is news, isn't it? It's news about the weather, it's news about the crop, it's news about the pandemic that we're all going through. And then how has that affected price? So that kind of news I'll listen to, yeah.
Nick, just a question. When you, because you said that you started trading during the pandemic, learning, gaining knowledge, what made you get into trading? Was it somebody that recommended it, or how did you come about it?
As a copywriter, I've written for a number of big banks, and I actually wrote for a time for an organization called Learn to Trade, Greg Secker's outfit. So I was doing quite a lot of copy there, and I started to get intrigued at that point. That's some time ago, and I was going to follow through and give it a go, but for some reason didn't get around to it. I think the pandemic for me was a major pause, as it has been for most of us. In my case, my freelance work just dried up, within days of news hitting this country that the pandemic had arrived in Italy. So I was unemployed in terms of a day job, and therefore had time to think, well, how could I, supplement what is going to be the universal credit if I'm not careful? So that's where I found myself with sort of time to think. And there was a lot of news around about traders and, of course, Bitcoin and all the rest of it. And I was just intrigued. I thought, well, give it a go, So
How are you educating yourself, Nick? Is it just books? Are you going through an academy or one-to-one tutoring? How you doing that?
quite a mix, really, of all of those. YouTube videos have been my main source of education. And then I will follow certain traders. I follow Roger Scott quite a lot. He's a big trader in the US. He is good with free material, which is quite analytical and serious, and without you having to pay for it. And I find most of his recommendations and way of looking at things, as you'd expect of a trader who traded professionally for over 20 years, to be very good. People like that. So yes, you get the YouTube videos, and then there's newsletters which often include links to videos. So I make use of those. Books, not so much. I mean, I have read a few, but books not so much. And of course, demo trading helps because you can sort of have a go at it and make mistakes and not get too emotional about it all.
Demo trading definitely helps.
Yeah, but otherwise, it's sort of being in the field. I mean, that's it, isn't it? You get the bumps and bruises and get your teeth knocked out every now and then, and you make notes of what you've experienced and hope not to make those mistakes again.
And I think that is a valid point, actually, Nick, because it's learning, it's growing, isn't it? We don't sort of step into a car the first time, turn on the ignition and drive the car. It takes time, it's repetition, it's consistency, it's learning and growing from our mistakes. And, that's exactly what trading is, or part of it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I just think one of the hardest things to get used to really is losing and not to take it too personally, because none of us likes losing money. And obviously, even less if it's a lot. And sometimes it can be really shocking. I mean, I've had periods where I've lost stupid amounts of money, and then just you feel kind of mixture of stupidity, shame, and anger. That this has happened to you, but you have to go through that, I guess, before you arrive at a state where you kind of shrug it off and go, it's all right. I learned something from that, and it takes a while to be able to do that, but I'm getting better at it. I'm not saying I've mastered it, but I'm definitely getting better at it. And I think when you do get better at it, you go back to your trading in a better state of mind, and therefore you're less likely to make mistakes.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Unless you go through it, Nick, you won't actually realize, because, there'd be times where I'd lose money, and then, I'd be so worked up about it. I'd go straight back in and say to myself, right, I'm going to go and get that money back. But then I'd end up losing it.
Yeah, revenge trading, as we call it.
And it's just, yeah, exactly, revenge trading. And it's the worst thing you can do. So walking away from a trade and just not really giving a shit, mind my language, sorry, is the way forward. So you just got to look at it that way. Trading is, you're not always going to win. So as long as you have your risk management, so you could lose maybe five trades, but you could have one trade that makes it all back and then some. So
yeah,
it boils down to risk management again.
Sure does. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was saying before as well, Nick, to a previous guest, is with trading, once you have good risk management, you sort of have to look at the losses almost like a business cost. So, in business, we have business costs, and, in trading, there's always going to be a loss or losses. And so if we can kind of get the mindset, or a trader can get the mindset where, right, okay, well, trading, there's going to be losses. But overall, with my strategy and plan and risk management, I'm going to be in profit. Then I think it kind of takes away the pressure. You kind of look at the long-term outcome instead of sort of every trade. I think that does help.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it. I try to look at it like that, that if you think of it as a business, you're going to have things break down and have to be repaired, costs that you don't want to spend money on, and so on. It is the cost of doing business, as they say.
Nick, what was your number one mistake starting out in trading? What was you making a lot of what was you doing a lot of?
Too big a trade size, without doubt.
Okay.
Yeah, and I still occasionally make that mistake, but much less often.
Can you just explain that a little bit? So what do you mean? So if you'll see a trade, you'll extend it, or where you should maybe take a 3-to-1, for example, but you're holding out for maybe a 5-to-1. Is that what you mean? Or
No, not risk reward so much as the actual trade size. In other words, a chunk of my margin, available margin.
Okay.
So I leave myself too tight on margin, or have done in the past. I'm much better at it now. So I would naively set out my plan with 3 or 4 trades and leave only a small amount of margin to cover the eventuality that all 4 of them go against me. And that's the problem. You're looking at 3 doing well, one that's perhaps not doing so well, and you think, oh, okay, well, those 3 are doing okay, and that one's maybe a bit off, but I can now take another trade. This looks great, and I'll take that. So I've got number 5. Suddenly the first 3 that were doing well are all going against you, and you're looking at a margin call because you just haven't taken that into account. And I think also it's natural we want to do well in any kind of task. It's not just about making money. We just want to do well, achieve good results. And that's fine. But what you do with trading, if you go too far with that thought, is put yourself under huge stress. And I got to the point where I thought, you know what, this is just not even worth putting your health at this kind of risk, where you go back to your charts, and every time you log in, your heart's racing because you think, yeah, this has gone against me, and am I going to get a margin call? Waking in the middle of the night and in a sweat, thinking I better check my trades. 4 a.m. I've been there. I've done, I'm sure a lot of the people listening have experienced something similar.
Of course,
it's really not a good place to be, and it's a downward spiral anyway. In every sense, I think, really.
I don't know if it's just me, but I quite actually like the buzz of waking up and seeing if I've made money or if I've lost it.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I did. But then when I had the bad run here and there, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I suppose I settled for something in between.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, but I think the thing is, once you push it to that limit, you have to accept that buzz is at some point going to get too much.
Yeah.
It's going to be counterproductive for you.
Definitely.
I'm just speaking from my own experience and a lot of the traders I talk to, but everyone's different, what you can take on. And I've got like 4 or 5 other jobs I'm doing in a day. So there's only so much I can give to it before it all gets too much.
Yeah. It sounds like you've really come a long way, Nic. You've learned, you've grown. I mean, where do you sort of see your trading going this year? Have you thought about that, or?
Greater consistency is what I would like. Improving how I read patterns. I think those are the main things, really. Whatever you trade, whether it's whatever asset, Forex, options, it's all kind of the same. We all have our different preferences. But I think it's just really working on consistency, not, another great result, because I've had those days where even with a small account, I was making quite silly money for that actual account. But then, because that just shows you, see, I was trading too big a trade size, because when it went wrong, I didn't blow an account, but I, would lose 20, 30%, in 2 or 3 days, because losses would accumulate.
And that's hard to get back.
Yeah, that's
to be honest.
Thing. Yeah.
You've got to be consistent enough to get that back and then make a profit on top. So I agree with you. For me, it's all about consistency.
Well, consistency is key, isn't it? It's probably one of the most important things to trading is just sort of sticking to your plan, being consistent, and then, along with that comes the outcome, really.
Yeah, it's sort of rather like the tortoise wins the race. The hare has the speed, but the tortoise wins the race. And there is, for me, I think that kind of applies when it comes to trading.
It's a very good analogy, actually. Because it's a journey, it's not a race.
Trading. Yeah, in many ways, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A lot of people think it's a get rich quickly sort of scheme, but it isn't. You've got to put the time and effort in. You've got to allow yourself time to educate and then, go into the markets with some degree of knowledge and discipline. Discipline is the main thing. And, a lot of people think, I'm going to start trading and then, I'll go into the markets and make a shitload of money, but it doesn't work like that.
No.
So
they're usually in for a rude awakening.
Nic, if it's okay, could we talk about the book that you're writing? I was fortunate enough to read the first chapter, and I was absolutely blown away. I couldn't put it down, and I cannot wait to read it once it's been published. So if you're happy to share, some details about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, very briefly, it's called The People We Love, at least that's the working title, and it looks at a family during COVID, covering just a few days of their lives and how they cope with all sorts of pressures. And I was inspired very much by my own trading experience, so I did write about that and how that can not only impact your own life, but also the people you care about. And I also took a look at my parents who are growing old now and some of the difficulties they were experiencing during the pandemic. And so it's very much sort of written in a way that you could quite easily adapt as a film. I mean, I'm a screenwriter as well. And it looks at these family members and loved ones over mainly 48 hours. It does extend a little bit further than that, but it looks at the various problems as they're going through all the different kinds of experiences that happen around the time I think I set it September of this year. So we were sort of coming out of the pandemic with vaccines becoming available. But my parents were having other kind of healthcare issues. And I based one of the story strands on a woman I knew who had been suffering domestic abuse. And so I drew on that story to a degree because that has been an issue, not just for her, but for quite a lot of people, unfortunately, in the pandemic months, with people staying at home more and the pressure cooker just really bubbling over and
that's right,
more violence at home and, people having nervous breakdowns because they're too alone or just frustrated that they can't go anywhere and so on. So it's not specifically about the pandemic in any sense. That's just the backdrop, if you like, but it does show how it affects our lives. It's now the first draft and I'm going through it as we speak, so to speak.
That's fantastic. So you're in the first draft now. I mean, like I said, I just couldn't put it down. It was the first chapter only. But I was really taken in by I don't know if she is the main character, but she was the woman in the story and sort of just really, you really kind of wrote it where you could just almost feel her emotions, her thoughts. It was
cool.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, I thought I would write myself as a woman to sort of get a distance from it. And I've spoken to female traders as well, so I sort of thought I could share some of the thoughts and ideas for the story. But as you remember from the opening chapter, it is an example of how trading can impact on certain people's lives.
Yes.
We open the scene with her walking into a flat where one trader is so angry with his broker that he's turned up with a gun demanding explanations and a new trading plan. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we all know that some traders have jumped out of windows and what have you.
Absolutely, yeah. I've heard all sorts of stories, as I'm sure you have, and obviously some good, some not so good, and people can go to sort of extreme measures.
Yeah, I mean, once you hit that sort of level of extreme losses, I mean, fortunately, I've not been there. I mean, I've spoken to people who've lost just incredible amounts of money, and you just think, how did you even let it get that far? That's when I guess the gambling mentality sort of takes over. But it is very true that you can hit a sort of tipping point in your control where your sort of sense of shame and the anger you're feeling does lead you to either, usually it's self-destructive rather than hurting other people. But, some people I'm sure do lash out, even if it's just verbally very nastily.
Yeah, of course. And it's again, it's the emotions, isn't it? I think there is a fine line sometimes between trading and gambling. It can be a fine line, and I think when it does go over to the line of gambling, that's when it can cause real problems for people.
Yeah,
I think people just need to speak about myself in particular. For me, it was just important to, if I've had a bad day, it was just a case of writing it and just walk away and just leave it. Because if you're stuck by the screen just thinking, I need to get back in on this and make my money back, then that's when you end up giving yourself a headache, making yourself angry. And then for me, it was just, I'd have a bad trade and I'd carry on trying to get the money back. And then I'd end up being absolutely livid. And it would just ruin my whole day or
week.
The week. I'd just be absolutely pissed off. And,
exactly. Yeah.
But you can hold on to it like Nilton said, like you said, Nic, for days, for weeks. You wake up and it's that kind of sinking feeling of, what have I done?
Yeah.
How am I going to rectify this? What shall I do? And it's almost a feeling of despair, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
All I can say is I'm just glad I've got locks on my window, you know? I don't want to...
What floor are you on? Fortunately, I'm on the ground floor.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
So you're in the first draft of the book, Nic. Where do you see this going? I mean, you mentioned about a screenplay. Are you going to look into that? Are you going to self-publish? Are you going to sort of send it to a publishing firm, or all of the above?
The state of publishing these days, I quite possibly will just self-publish and try to build an audience through my podcast, other traders, because there is a strong sort of trader aspect to it. But I've been published before and made so little money. I mean, less than, an average novel would get me less than I earn as a copywriter in a few weeks. So you just think, well, holding on for the money on that. Okay, you could get lucky, but you do have to go through a long process of finding an agent. Then you have to wait for the agent's feedback. Then the agent pitches publishers, and it's another 18 months before you get snapped up.
Yeah.
You could be looking at 18 months to 2 years before it's out there. And then you think, well, where are the bookshops these days? I know we can put things on Amazon, but I don't know. It's very, very hard to make money as a writer now. I mean, I know some best-selling authors who say, and they've been doing it for a long time, they will say, I've probably been earning about the same as a teacher.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So this idea that, oh, you're a writer, you must be doing all right. Well, no, if you're writing for the money, you're stupid, I think. It's just not. You can, obviously, like anything you set your mind to, pretty much make money, but you really need to write for the passion. And I'm writing for the passion. I'm writing for the people I know, and hopefully people who are taking an interest in my podcast and other stuff I'm doing. So it's more likely I will self-publish and try to do things that way. But you never know. If I do come across somebody who's interested, I might try an agent or...
Yeah. I think unless you're sort of that J.K. Rowling of the world, they're the ones that do well. But it seems to me, I mean, I've heard a lot that self-publishers can do really well as well. There's different sources such as Amazon, and it's a lot easier to self-publish, I think, these days than to go to an actual publishing firm.
Yeah, publishers don't make all that much money either these days. And so they're going to give huge priority, really, to anything that's sort of very mainstream, because they feel a little bit more confident they can sell that. I'm a white male, over 50, straight. Yeah, I think that's probably I'm about the worst group you can be in, really, to get published these days. If I were young and female and so on, and preferably, ethnic minority, all great for them. I've got kids who are half Japanese, so, I hope they can make use of the sort of modern culture of giving women a little bit more help than, say, men of my age. But again, it's just another instance where I think to myself, well, I'm just not even in the right group who's going to take an interest in me because of those things. And that's, the culture we're in, but there's no point moaning about it. Just get on with your own thing, I think.
Yeah.
But I think you've picked something to talk about, Nic, which is trading, and everybody is interested in that. So I think that the area which your book is going to be going in is a good area. So I don't see it, selling X amount. I think it will do well. So
you never know. Yeah. And I think one thing I've tried to do, which I haven't seen anyone else do, is give a story about an ordinary person turning, in this case, her hand to trading. We've all seen, these big city slickers and traders. We all seen the, greed is good and what have you. And we know those stories of big city guys and Wolf from Wall Street, and that scene, that big glamorous, big loud money and cocaine and all the rest of it, that is associated with trading. But I've taken an ordinary person who doesn't have all those things, hasn't got that background, and given the reader her story.
Sounds great.
Very unique.
When do you reckon you'll have it done then, Nic?
I think sort of February, March time. Yeah.
Any free copies going my way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Top of my list.
Signed, of course.
Yes, exactly. So, Nic, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is you talk about discipline and stuff like that. What have you done to discipline yourself? You say you're getting better at it. What is it you're doing to stop you for example, for over trading or bad risk management? What is it exactly?
Yeah, I suppose there are various steps. I mean, I'll perhaps just run through a few briefly. I think one of the things to bear in mind, once you've found the trade you think is a credible trade, a trade idea, is to really map out where it could go if it goes wrong, and to think of your potential losses and can you manage that. So going back to your question about support and resistance, you might look at a chart and think, well, if this doesn't work out and it drops, where's the next support level?
Yeah.
And if you can take that kind of punishment, you might think, right, well, that's okay. I'll work with that. But you factor that in before you take the trade. So I do more of that than I used to. And I trade slightly smaller. I tend to, if the trade's going well, then I might scale in, at the next dip if it's longer, or, just another smaller trade perhaps, so that I'm testing the waters first. Because I'm sure you've had this, Milton, where you take a trade and it goes completely against you. And you think it's almost personal. It's like, oh, it's that dickhead again. Well, let's screw him up, and give him a hard time.
Yeah.
It can get like that. You just think, my God, everyone else trading here is doing all right except for me. But yeah, so those are things: trade size, looking at the potential loss, slowing yourself down. I think is good. Slowing yourself down and waiting.
Yeah.
I would say that so often I'll see a good trade setup, and then at least the older me, if you like, would say, right, I'll go in. Now I tend to wait longer. I want more confirmation. And it's almost like you see a setup and then you have to wait for that to really establish itself or mature.
Yeah.
And then you go in. And it's always a lot longer than you first thought. And so you have to get used to that process, because we all want to get in and have some action. But I think slowing it right down and waiting just a bit longer, it's tough, because you want to get in there and do something. You think this is good, and you're going to miss the opportunity if you don't get in there.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, isn't it? I mean, when you see it and you think, oh God, if I don't get in now, I'm going to miss out.
Yeah.
It's really hard to gauge sometimes, isn't it? Nic, what time frame do you use? I know you mentioned a mixture.
I use pretty much all of them. Depends on what trading you're doing, but I have found in the last, I suppose, 7 or 8 months that using the weekly charts is at least very useful to understand the kind of mood of the market. Whether it's, you might be trading a daily chart thinking, oh, right, well, this is going up. But if you look at the weekly, you'll see it's actually really only retracement. So you're always kind of working against the grain. And yes, it could go your way, but I prefer to understand at least the bigger picture. So I tend to start with the weekly and then work down. But with this kind of volatility, I would say the lower time frame is very useful. Even 3 minute, 5 minute.
Do you trade that? Do you?
I might do. It just depends on the volatility. But if we get a day of one thing or another surging, then I'll just do literally 5 minutes and get out.
I mean, I find with those lower time frames, I'm just stuck to the screen, and that's what I don't want.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the best time to do that is 2:30 when the US session opens, because that's where you get the big momentum. On every instrument pretty much. So that's the time to do it. And so you're really only looking at half an hour, 40 minutes at the most, which I usually can do.
The markets have definitely been unpredictable for quite some time now, so it'll be interesting to see where they go this year, where it's heading.
Well, everyone's predicting a bigger bang than we've ever had, even bigger than the 1929.
Yes.
Will it happen? I don't know.
There's a lot of predictions about that. There's a lot of sort of, not evidence, but a lot of sort of top traders, investors are saying this is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just a case of when. So it's always good, I guess, to sort of be prepared. But sometimes, for traders and their strategy, if that happens, it doesn't affect their trading because they trade a certain way. So
it goes short.
Good answer. Yeah. Nic, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
And thank you for having me.
It's been really nice
Yeah, it's
talking
been
to
great.
you. Thank you.
Cheers.
So, yeah, I think we'll just wrap this up, guys. So, yeah, once again, Nic, thank you for coming on the show. Can't wait to have that book sent to me. I'll send you my address when it's signed.
I'm looking forward to reading it too.
So, yeah, for anyone listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you can follow me on my Instagram handle, which is Nilton Fernandez Official. So, yeah, guys, thank you, Nic, once again. And, yeah, looking forward to reading your book. So,
thanks so much.
Nic,
no problem.
just before we finish, if traders do want to contact you regarding the podcast or your book, do you have social media? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Well, A Trader's Life is online at, well, two places really. atraderslife.com is my main website, but I have the individual episodes on Buzzsprout. So I think it's just something like buzzsprout.com/atraderslife.
Okay.
Anyway, if you put A Trader's Life into Google, it comes very high up in the searches. Anyway, if you put in trading podcast, it'll probably pop up there on the first page.
Great. Thank you very
so
much.
that's the podcast. And with respect to sort of contact, the Traders Life podcast is on Instagram and on Twitter. Just run a search for it,
Okay.
Add me and message me if you fancy it. And if you're a trader and would like to be on the podcast, do get in touch. I can also be contacted at Nic, that's NIC _Penrake, PENRAKE @hotmail.com. That's the regular email.
Thank you, Nic.
Speak to you soon.
Cheers.
If you are a trader who is struggling with their psychology and you would like more information on the Trading Mindset program, then please visit www.hypnosisfortraders.co.uk. The program is changing the lives for so many traders, and you can read and watch the many success stories. You can also access a free 21-day transformational audio. This is to help gain better self-discipline as a trader. So please visit the website. Thank you.